Good evening, everyone. I'm Peter Urschler, and it's my great honor and privilege to serve as the mayor of the borough of Phoenixville. I want to personally welcome you tonight and thank you for joining in this conversation around the restoration of rail service between the Phoenixville area and Philadelphia. Welcome to all of you, and especially welcome to some of our special guests that we have here with us this evening. Representative Melissa Schusterman from the 157th District, Representative Joe Cerisi from the 146th District, Don Viesemal representing Senator Andy Dinniman's district, the 19th Senatorial District, and also our former state representative Paul Drucker, who's also joined us today. And we have with us also Ken Butera, a Phoenixville Area School District Director. Thank you all very much for being here with us. This is an exciting process. And although a significant amount of effort has been put in by our task force, we know that we still have a long journey to travel in order to make rail restoration a possibility. What we are talking about here tonight is innovative. It's challenging conventional wisdom, as you can see by the quote from WHYY's Jim Saska. Tonight is significant for a number of reasons. It's Earth Day, and an opportunity to reflect on our impact on the environment, an impact that we know public transportation will lessen. In fact, according to the American Public Transportation Association, public transportation saves the United States 4.2 billion gallons of gasoline annually, and communities that invest in public transit reduce the nation's carbon emissions by 37 million metric tons. However, some 45% of Americans do not actually have access to public transportation. Today is also April 22nd, or 4/22, which we know many of our residents is part of their daily commute. According to TRIP, a national transportation research group, Route 422 from Oaks to King of Prussia was named the third most congested corridor for commuters in the Philadelphia area. Public transportation, like rail service, transforms communities and the lives of people living in them by spurring economic development, promoting sustainable lifestyles, and providing a higher quality of life. Every segment of our community, individuals, families, nonprofits, tourism, and businesses will benefit from the restoration of rail service. And now we begin our journey this evening with Phoenixville's historian Ryan Conroy by taking a look at the history of rail service in our community.
Phoenixville's first known railroad station was completed around 1833 at the site of the present-day Columbia Station. The station as we know it today was completed in 1864 during the Civil War. Since its inception, Phoenixville and the railways have had an important relationship. Many of the actual rails used to complete the Philadelphia Reading Railroad were produced by the Phoenix Iron Company, and the legislation to incorporate the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad Company was introduced by Phoenixville's State Representative Elijah F. Pennypacker, a well-known abolitionist and champion of the public transportation and education. By 1871, the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad was the largest company in the world, with a gross value of over $170 million, or $3.5 trillion by today's standards. The driving force behind the formation of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad was to move anthracite coal from northeastern Pennsylvania to Reading, Phoenixville, and Philadelphia. Anthracite was a hard coal which was a game changer in the manufacturing industry as it burned longer and allowed the iron furnaces to get hotter, producing a higher quality product. Through the continuous supply of anthracite coal and Phoenix Iron Company's commitment to innovation and patents on the Griffin gun and Phoenix column, Phoenixville's economy boomed, so came a need for labor. Once again, the railroad played a key role in fueling not only the furnaces of the Phoenix Iron Company, but also fueling its need for laborers. The Phoenix Iron Company set up a sales office on Walnut Street in Philadelphia, and even sent agents to the ports of Philadelphia, so as new immigrants came off the boats from Ireland, Germany, Italy, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia, they would be recruited and put onto the train to Phoenixville to begin working for the Phoenix Iron Company. From the Civil War through Vietnam, Phoenixville and its railroad station played key roles. In the Civil War, it was the movement of troops and delivery of over 1,200 Griffin guns to the Union Army. Members of the Ladies' Aid Society, which met on the 200 block of Bridge Street, even used the railroads to deliver food, socks, and mittens to Phoenixville soldiers on the battlefields. For World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam, the railroad brought injured troops from all over the country to Phoenixville for transport to the Valley Forge Military Hospital, which is one of the largest military hospitals on the East Coast. We know at least 11 U.S. presidents have passed through the Phoenixville station with 2 stopping. Teddy Roosevelt, one of my favorite presidents, to make a speech, and Chester Arthur to stay overnight. In more modern times, the railway was part of everyday life in Phoenixville, taking people to work, into the city for Phillies games, and for many children, a train ride into the city served as the opening to the Christmas holiday, as they went to see the lights and show in the Wanamaker building. But in 1981, just shy of 150 years of rail service in Phoenixville, the hallowed halls of the Columbia Station fell silent. And around the same time, the Phoenix Iron Company ceased operations. And without Phoenixville's access to transportation and economic driver, our future looked uncertain.
These were the rails that delivered the Phoenix columns, which would be the structural foundation for our country's greatest symbol of freedom, the Washington Monument. These were the rails that welcomed presidents and countless immigrants from all countries searching for the American dream, that transported our soldiers and our daily commuters. These are the rails that will guide our community on our continued journey to economic prosperity and sustainability. It was through hard work and innovation that the Phoenixville community of yesteryear thrived. The railway enabled our people and our products to travel across the globe. It is that same dedication and fortitude which has brought us back from the ashes and has built us into the community that we are today, a regional leader in human rights, environmental sustainability, nonprofits, affordable housing, craft breweries and distilleries, and soon we hope to add to that transportation. I want to thank you all for being here with us tonight, and we are excited for you to be part of this conversation as we begin our program. So first, we'll go through a quick update of Phoenixville today and Phoenixville tomorrow. We'll then move from there into a couple of other items specifically around the rail project, our mayor's task force, and then we will eventually wrap it up with a panel discussion from our panel of experts that we have here with you today. So as all of you know, the Phoenixville community is growing, and we have continued to grow substantially over the last 20 years. And this is due to a number of factors, but as we recently were quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer, a lot of this has to do with millennials as well as baby boomers wanting to seek and live in these beautiful small-knit communities where they can actually have a nice walkable downtown. And so we see that through all of our development and the people moving into the Phoenixville community. Because of that, though, traffic has increased and, of course, has put additional pressure on the 422 corridor. The Phoenixville of tomorrow. What we've realized, and the statistics have shown us, is that the majority of the people who live in Phoenixville, although we live here and we enjoy our weekends in Phoenixville, the majority of us actually work outside of Phoenixville in these large corporate centers or large destinations such as King of Prussia and then also Philadelphia. In 2012, a survey was done about the Phoenixville region, and they found that 84% of individuals living in Phoenixville actually commuted in single occupancy vehicles. So these are people getting into their cars every single day with just one person leaving Phoenixville to go to one of these employment centers. And that, of course, our current infrastructure is just not able to support that. Regional growth And this slide may scare some people when you look at it, but this is US Census data just based on where we've been in the past and where we will go into the future. And that is our projected growth over the next 27 years is about 42.25% for this region. So the six kind of regions that make up this area of Charlestown, East Pikeland, Phoenixville, Schuylkill, West Vincent, and Upper Providence. The largest amount of growth will actually be experienced by Phoenixville with an approximate increase of 54.34%. And so we are really trying to start this conversation to ensure that as a community we are able to sustain, and that's where essentially the birth of this program began. You can see also some of our congestion and commuting patterns. We were laughing a little bit today about 422, of course, our favorite road out there. It is the third most congested corridor in the greater Philadelphia area. And on average, as a result of traffic, we actually waste about 76 million gallons of fuel each year for people sitting in traffic and about 156 million hours. And so we hope that this project will get you back some of that time and some of that fuel. Essentially, we wanted to take a proactive approach, as we do in many things here in Phoenixville. When you look at the history of our community, you look at the history of rail, talking to our historian, Ryan, you realize that Phoenixville has always been a very innovative and self-starting place. We've never really played by the rules, and it's really helped us throughout our history. And so once again, we had that same kind of grassroots effort happen right here in Phoenixville. And we had a large group of people, as we have had in the past, who wanted to talk about how can we think differently about public transportation? What can we do differently? Are there ways that we can get around some of this congestion and ensure that Phoenixville will be a sustainable community? And so through those conversations, we formed the Mayor's Task Force. And so the Mayor's Task Force was essentially formed of a variety of individuals. And there were some very specific goals. And these are still the goals of the task force today. The goal is to restore rail service between Philadelphia and Phoenixville. We certainly are happy to share our learnings and our process that we've used to help other communities restore rail service, but really this task force is focused on Phoenixville because it is built of individuals from the Phoenixville community. And so through the task force, we have actually assembled a group of over 20 people who have a variety of backgrounds. People who are just citizens in Phoenixville, developers, real estate owners, business owners, nonprofit leaders, all people who have a vested interest in ensuring the sustainability and public transportation is available to all of our residents. So I would ask now that if you are a member of the task force, please stand and be recognized. So we thank you for your contribution. So we do have a small selection of our task force here tonight, and we thank you for your contribution in ensuring that Phoenixville will be able to sustain well into the future. So without further ado, I'm actually going to turn over to the next part of our program here, and that's to really discuss the rail restoration project. And for that, we're going to bring up Manny Demutis of the Demutis Group. So Manny, it's all you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is a really exciting project. I think that Phoenixville has made a habit of doing things that people said couldn't be done. This is a typical example. We have spent a lot of time trying to understand how the train systems and projects of the past failed to see that how we could avoid those pitfalls. And so the first thing that we tasked Barry Cassidy to do was to determine what were the issues that really stopped the Schuylkill River Metro, and there was another attempt in the early 2000s. And so we identified all of those things. And what we found out was there were very specific reasons why they failed. The Schuylkill River Metro, Valley Metro, failed because it had a $2.2 billion price tag, and that was just something that was unaffordable to federal government, state government, local. We found out that the 2004-2005 study failed because the tracks needed to be upgraded, and there was some processes in place that needed to be in place for it to be safe that weren't. And so we got an understanding that there's a hierarchy to how there's a hierarchy to how these projects get funded, are planned, and are built. And that is a very arduous process. United States is a big country. The federal government has lots of little Phoenixvilles everywhere, and so getting in the ring for those dollars was going to be highly unlikely. Barry had researched and found out that there is a way that we can have rail service to Phoenixville, and there is a way that we can circumvent the process, the traditional process. So we formed the committee, and what was really important, and one of the things that we wanted to do was we had specific benchmarks. We said we have to determine whether the legislation that we've uncovered actually is viable. And so we spent a fair amount of time doing that, went to Harrisburg, and found out that, yeah, it just hasn't been done yet. We went and spoke with Norfolk Southern and said we'd like to do a train project, and they said, well, please don't. But if SEPTA says yes, then we'll say, then we'll talk to SEPTA. And then we met, and so as you can tell, each one of these things, it's a go or no go. And so as we worked our way down through this list, lo and behold, we have a project that is affordable in transportation, in the transportation world, and it's able to be financed, but it's going to require the local residents and local people, local governments to fund it. And so where we are, it's viable. Ridership numbers are from the 2000s, mid-90s to 2000, and they don't account for all the growth that you saw since 1996, right? So that's encouraging. So ridership has never been the question. There's a lot of train projects, a lot of communities want train projects to say, wow, ridership, you just don't have the ridership. It's just not going to work. Well, Phoenixville doesn't have that problem. Phoenixville and the region, and the Phoenixville region, will have more than enough riders. So the question is, how do we figure out, then that leaves us to, okay, where are we going to have stations? We all have been to Paoli numerous times. We understand that parking is you can't have a train station without parking, because it's going to be great for the folks that live in Phoenixville or close to the station locations, but the majority of folks are going to drive there. And so we've identified areas of potential areas for train station. And we've worked through a budget with SEPTA that we feel pretty comfortable about. They feel, it's not that we need to feel comfortable about it, they need to feel comfortable about it. So we said, okay, what's the process? We're getting closer. The no's and the no-goes are going away. The goes are continuing to pile up. So what we've done is we've divided our committee, and we've divided the mayor's task force into committees. And the committee that I'm on is responsible for reaching out to the local municipalities and reaching out to the local taxing authorities and asking them to put a member from their group onto a separate Phoenixville train committee that will take all of our work, all the mayor's task force work, and start dealing with the more specific questions. And then once they have resolution to those and the answers to those questions, then it's up to those individuals to go back to the individual municipalities and present the Phoenixville train. I believe that this is not only possible, I believe it's probable. It really comes down to what Phoenixville and Schuylkill and King of Prussia and any of the other municipalities want for their community. It's reasonable in cost, which I think is huge. Do we have a cost slide? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can go into I can go slide by slide if you go back. Yeah. So one of the issues way back when was it's not electrified past Norristown, and so technology has allowed us for a dual mode locomotive, thank you. Wow. A dual mode, which is diesel and electric, so it allows us not to have those overhead wires, and so we can get back into we can get to Phoenixville relatively simple. The reason we should do this, I mean, there's an Earth Day component to public transportation. There's lots of access and allowing the residents in your community to have access to job centers and other opportunities outside your community. There's lots of really great reasons. One of the biggest reasons is the impact as an individual homeowner on your home value doesn't get driven any higher than by public access to public transportation. So the number one thing that an elected official can do is to provide a community or allow the community to provide itself public transportation. Nothing drives your values higher. And so it's the access. It's all the things that we talk about, but it's convenient, but it's the one thing. So we have ourselves in a position where we can offer the individual homeowner and property owner this benefit, and it's a huge benefit. So how do we do it? We do it with a thing called tax increment financing. And tax increment financing is a very simple concept. It basically says that every property has an underlying real estate value, real estate tax value and assessment. And it has one before development occurs, and it has a greater one after development occurs. And so the increment between what it was and what it will be is an amount. And that amount is what we're proposing to use for a bond. And that bond is what we're going to use to pay for the train. That's vastly different than how it's done today. How it's done today is you stand in line at the federal level for as much money as you can get, and then you hope that you stand in line at the state level and hope you can get as much as they can offer you. And then maybe you have a project and maybe you don't, but it's completely out of your control. This program says that, hey, you want a train and you're willing to pay for it with new development dollars, then you can have a train. And I think it's a very empowering legislation, and it offers the question to us. Next slide.
Traditionally, rail restoration projects were funded through federal or state funds. This process can be very competitive and time-consuming. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, through the Transportation Revitalization Investment District Act, also known as the TRID, local communities can prioritize transportation projects by utilizing local tax dollars generated through incremental tax revenues from new development. The TRID was created by Act 238 in 2004 and amended in 2016 by Act 151 to provide for the specific purposes and intent of a designated TRID to include increase of overall ridership on the public transportation systems, including Amtrak, while generating additional revenues for current and expanded services, capital improvements, and related ongoing maintenance. As part of the legislation, all the local taxing authorities, the municipality, school district, and county must agree to the creation of a TRID. Once they have done so, a portion of incremental tax revenues generated by new development can be transferred to a TRID for a period of time. These funds can be used towards the completion and future maintenance of a specific and necessary transit capital and public infrastructure improvements. For example, the restoration of rail service. The TRID legislation is extremely detailed and only allows for incremental tax revenues to be captured from new development projects within a 3/4 mile radius of a station location. The distance ensures the enhancement of the use, connectivity, as well as handicapped access to the station. The use of the TRID legislation in capturing of incremental tax revenues generated by new development is one of the ways local communities can prioritize their own transportation needs, instead of waiting for federal or state funding. Here is an example to help better illustrate the TRID legislation and incremental tax revenues. Say we have a piece of property within a 3/4 mile radius of a proposed station which will be utilized once the rail service is restored. The property is currently worth $100,000. Because it's just an empty lot, the current taxes on that property, which are shared by all taxing authorities, the municipality, school district, and county, are $1,000 per year. Now the property is developed with a variety of homes or buildings on it and is now assessed at $1 million. The annual taxes jump to $100,000 per year because of the new development. The $99,000 difference between the undeveloped and developed property are the incremental tax difference. If this area had been designated as a TRID, given its distance from the proposed station location, which would service the restored rail service, all or part of the $99,000 could be committed for a period of time to the agreed transportation project. The Transportation Revitalization Investment District Act allows us as a community to prioritize our transportation needs through agreement of our taxing authorities without waiting for federal or state funding.
Yeah, so that's the essence of what we're trying to get accomplished, and so we continue to work with the folks that are along the line to see and to get their buy-in on the idea. I think that that's the most important aspect of this right now. If they don't buy the idea, then then you don't have a project. If the residents and the community don't buy the idea, then you don't have a project. This is our budget, and so Schuylkill Valley Metro dies a slow, painful death at $2.2 billion. The 2004 study, when the ridership numbers were so compelling that they said, okay, well, we have to do something, and this is in the late 90s, early 2000s. So they said, let's see if we can't revamp it, and they try to revamp it, but it comes in at $650 million, and that's too much too. So, excuse me. So what we've done is we took a look with our consultant Tom Frawley and in conjunction with SEPTA, and we said, okay, how much is this actually going to cost us? And you'll see our numbers there. Our base budget is about $101 million, and for all of us, that is a lot of money. But in the transportation and infrastructure world, it is a drop in the bucket. When you add in the contingency of about $10 million, you come to about a $111 million project. How that's broken down is the following. And by the way, the first estimate on the widening of 422 was $750 million. Just want to, I got to put that out there because it's very, very important that you understand where the basis and bias is and how incredibly important this is for the citizens of Phoenixville. And while I think it's very important that we have great improvements on 422, I'm not trying to disparage that. There are dollars available to improve a lot of lives, and this is a low cost alternative. There's signaling repairs and improvements in Norristown and Bridgeport that are $1.9 million. There's storage facilities and there's midday storage. The bulk of the dollars actually comes from the rolling stock. So you're looking at about $55 million for that, and almost $9 million for locomotives. And then the next big price tag, I believe, is for the stations, platforms. And so, that's, the stations are $17.6 million. And we're working on alternatives on how we can get that cost down too. But this is a good starting number, and it allows us the opportunity to move this project forward. Quite honestly, one of the hardest parts about this project is convincing people that that's actually a real number, because anytime they hear transportation projects, $100 million, they think that you're going 10 feet. That's the starting line. But this is our total project cost. So we have a lot of work to do yet, but this is some of the work that we've done. We've ridership counts. We've had preliminary meetings with the Norfolk Southern and SEPTA, and we've detailed the plans and cost estimate. We are continuing. We've gotten support from every municipality and taxing authority that we've met with. We still have others to meet with, including both Montgomery County and Chester County. So wish us luck. We have to finalize the station locations. That's really important, right? I mean, this has to work, and it has to work in what already exists, and you have to be able to park it, and there's lots of other things going on. So that's something that we're going to continue to work on. We have to establish the TRIDs. So we have to establish the zones where we're going to do this tax increment financing. And then most importantly, we need to continue getting this information out to the different communities. It's really, really important. Your involvement is incredibly important. So, so that's where we are.
Thank you so much, Manny. And so now we're going to move into the next part of our program, which is our moderated panel. I know that we have been collecting some questions, and some of you have submitted questions online. For those of you who are watching us virtually, if you would, please submit questions in your comment boxes. We are monitoring those, and if we can get to them, we will also ensure that we're taking some of those questions. I'm now happy to introduce Brooke Ginty. She is the General Counsel for the Mayor's Task Force on Rail Restoration, as well as a partner with Bear Romaine Ginty, and she'll be our moderator for tonight's panel.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. We are very excited that you are excited about bringing this train back into Phoenixville. We understand how incredibly important this can be for our community. We also understand there are a lot of questions that come along with this. There's questions about how the project is going to start. There's a lot of questions about station locations. We don't know yet. There are questions about costs. So what we've done is we have assembled some of our members of our task force who play a different role on that task force, and we've compiled some questions for them to answer for us. So what I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to have each of our panel members introduce themselves, give a little bit of background, and then I want them to each tell you what they are most interested and excited about when it comes to the train coming into Phoenixville. So I'll start with Manny, who we've already met, but Manny.
Hi, I'm Manny Demutis. I'm a local developer. And the thing that I'm most excited about is this gives us, and I say us, Phoenixville, this gives us a leg up. It gives us more mobility to jobs. It gives us more mobility to and access to the rest of the world. And when we lost the train in '81, that was taken away. And so I think it would be a great communal accomplishment if we could get this done. And besides the fact, I got to tell you, they said we couldn't do it, and I don't. That's a big driving force, too.
Marion.
Hi, I'm Marion Moskowitz. I'm known as a developer of Franklin Commons, but I also do some work in town. I'm really excited about sustaining our revitalization because I believe that without this train, it's going to be very hard to sustain it. We need to move people, and we need them to be happy about going to work in the morning. And they have a lot of stress when they're driving and waiting on 23, and we'd like to take that away.
We have John Ewald. John?
Good evening. John Ewald. I have the privilege to serve as the Vice President of Phoenixville Borough Council, on which I also chair the Infrastructure, Technology, and Transportation Committee. Through my day job, I actually work for an organization that is tasked with improving air quality, congestion, and access to mass transit. So this is a wheelhouse in multiple layers for me. What I find most compelling about this is both the environmental impact of, as the mayor pointed out, 84% are taking single occupancy vehicles. Every passenger on this train is one less car that is sitting in traffic and idling most of their time as they commute into the city, into Great Valley, wherever they're going. The fewer cars we have on the road, everybody's commute is made better, but also the job access that this would provide for all skill levels to go to different work centers and find higher paying jobs, but regardless of your background, regardless of what kind of work you're looking to do, access is critical to those employment centers.
Next, we have Tom Frawley. Tom?
Thanks. My name's Tom Frawley. I'm principal at Thomas E. Frawley Consulting, and I'm a consultant to the task force. And I just like to say I've worked on about a dozen passenger rail startups, and there are a few things to compare with the excitement within a community or a region when you can put a project like this in the win column. So I'm looking forward to helping Phoenixville put one in the win column.
All right, so we assembled a couple questions. I'm going to dole them out to each one of our panel members. We're going to start with John. John, how will the train service help alleviate traffic on our major roadways?
Thank you, Brooke. I think I cut into this a little bit with my introduction, but to go a little bit deeper, that 84% are in SOVs. That's 500,000 residents in Chester County, 800,000 in Montgomery County. The averages break down pretty similarly across both county lines. Anything we can do to remove people from driving in their cars. We can't build bridges and highways wide enough or big enough in order for them to accommodate everybody in an SOV. As Mandy mentioned, this is a small price tag compared to what most transportation projects actually come out to. Your 202 widening projects are averaging $25 million a mile. The King of Prussia Bridge project is just under $100 million just for the 1 mile between the bridges that connects 422 from Oaks into King of Prussia. So the importance of reducing vehicle need is critical to the environment, to job access, and just the overall health of the community.
John, just for those of us who don't know what SOV is, what's an SOV?
Single occupancy vehicle, sorry.
Thank you. Maybe I probably wasn't the only one. Okay, then I'm going to have this question for Peter. Peter, why are we attempting to initiate train service? Would it not just be better to wait for King of Prussia to finish its line?
So they are actually two very different projects. So many of you have probably heard that there is a project that is on the books and is really being kind of promoted by SEPTA right now, which is to extend the light rail line into King of Prussia, essentially towards the Valley Forge Casino. And so that's the light rail line that actually runs to the 69th Street station, which is very different than the project that we're actually proposing. Our project would actually be to connect with the Manayunk Norristown line, with the regional rail line, and then go into 30th Street station. The massive difference between these two projects, certainly that is an incredible project and would be very helpful, especially to get people into the employment center of King of Prussia. But what I would say is that that's where you're starting to look, like John is talking about and Manny's talked about, that's where you start to see the numbers significantly increase, because they are actually laying track, or in that case, they're going to be laying overhead kind of rail lines for that light rail in order to get it into King of Prussia. Our project is proposing a partnership with existing rail lines so that we're not laying new track or trying to electrify track. Now, of course, as time goes by, that may change a bit, but for the most part, when we connect through Norristown into that Manayunk Norristown regional rail line, we're able to go from Phoenixville in a single seat, so not single occupancy vehicle, but on a single seat, you could get on a train here in Phoenixville and you could ride all the way into Philadelphia. And that is essentially what we envision and our goal for this project.
Yeah, just to add to that, we're different projects, and they're following the traditional funding source. So we're not even competing projects. We will both serve King of Prussia, but I believe that their price tag is about $1.2 billion that was published, and so they're following the traditional modeling, and we're following the TRID model.
I think one of the things Peter mentioned too that's really important is the tracks. And can you just talk about the difference with, we don't have to build tracks? Tom?
Yeah, that's a very, very important difference. The extension of the light rail line to King of Prussia would be all brand new construction, so building a rail line where there is none now. Our project involves utilizing a rail network that is in place. Not that it would not require enhancements and improvements to accommodate the additional traffic, but essentially using something that's already in place. That's a major difference.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Next question for Marion, and there are a lot of questions. There have been audience questions, there have been Boxy Pop questions about Norfolk Southern and SEPTA. So Marion, have we had discussions with Norfolk Southern and SEPTA, and
Yes.
how's that going?
Yes, we have had discussions with Norfolk Southern. They have not committed to anything yet. We're hoping that at some point they will. But we have had numerous conversations with SEPTA and numerous meetings. In fact, SEPTA has been helping us refine our budget to get those numbers to where they should be, since they have a great deal more experience than we do. But we have had many meetings with them. They appointed someone to our task force, so they are intimately involved with what we're doing.
Thank you, and thank you for Brian, who sent that over to VoxyPop, and I know there are other members of our community here that had asked that question. This question was submitted by Ed Nardi, probably a member sitting with us today live, and this is going to be for Manny. Manny, what is the time frame of bringing the train to Phoenixville?
Well, it's as soon as possible. You know, there's nothing like a sense of urgency. I don't think you get anything done and say, listen, I can't wait for this train. It's going to be 10 years. You know, let's put all of our blood, sweat, and tears into it. No, I think, you know, as a community, we need to create a sense of urgency and have a sense of urgency and just continue to work through the issues. You know, just like our revitalized town, every time we took 2 steps forward, we took 1 step backward. And so you had to fight through all these various issues and gain consensus. So it's as soon as possible. I mean, how much time would it take us physically? I mean, that's probably a question for Tom. If we had the money today, how long would it take us to recreate rail service?
Tom?
Money in hand, you could probably, with institutional cooperation from the host railroads, meaning Norfolk Southern and SEPTA, you're probably looking at 2 years to 3 years. So that's a reasonable estimate.
I think I would say something just from a time frame process is there's a lot of different entities at play, a lot of different, 2 different counties, school districts, and the entities that run those rails now. So time frame, I think, is also dependent on everybody cooperating together and moving forward. So this question comes from Brooke Schwenk. I don't know if she's here with us today, but she did submit this question. I'm going to give this one to John. John, my property backs up to the rail line. What measures will be taken to protect homes from dangerous trains and noise pollution?
I think that's a good question, and any property owner that backs up to a train line, and particularly this train line, is familiar that it is currently actively used. So Norfolk Southern runs on average 8 trains a day on this track, and freight travel is not actually scheduled. So they're running in the middle of the night. My residence is within earshot of the train track, so I hear it coming through all hours of the night. The trains that we're proposing are simply daytime commuter trains. These are not going to be running back at 3 in the morning with heavy loads. These are passenger trains that are lighter, safer, and quieter than what's currently on the track.
Okay, and actually that's a good lead into Tom's question. Tom, we have a question about the technology, and you are the master of our technology questions. So can you tell us a little bit more about the locomotives and explain the technology behind what we would be using?
Certainly. Manny made a mention earlier of dual mode or dual powered locomotives, and that's the key. The SEPTA system is an electrified system, so there's an overhead wire carrying high voltage AC current, and the SEPTA trains that I'm sure many of us here have ridden utilize that as their means of powering themselves. But when you leave the SEPTA system at Norristown and go up on the Norfolk Southern, that railroad is not electrified. So the issue is how do we get a train that can operate in both of those territories, the electrified territory and the non-electrified. So there is a product, a locomotive that is capable of doing both. It's able to, through a pantograph, reach up and touch the overhead wire to retrieve high voltage power to run as an electric locomotive, which is critical on the SEPTA side for a variety of reasons, most important of which is to traverse the Center City Tunnel. And it also can run as a diesel locomotive, just as the freight trains that pass here now do, to get between Norristown and Philadelphia.
Thank you very much. Next question from Marion. Marion, what is the regional impact of bringing commuter rail service to Phoenixville?
Well, it's great. There's a big uptick in value for the homes here. The businesses will get more people coming and shopping. We would like to see people use the train to come up and maybe bring their bikes and hit the trails and take the Schuylkill Valley Trail up to, west of here, and shop while they're in town and eat. So there's a lot of economic drivers, but the sustainability for the revitalization that we have going here now is really critical. And also the environment. I mean, can you imagine taking all those cars off the road? What that does to our atmosphere right here in Phoenixville. So I was a commissioner on the Patco train line, and we moved 10.8 million people per year on those lines in Camden and into Philadelphia. And boy, does that make their life easier. They can come in to go to games, into the city. You just enjoy life a lot more. You can read a book instead of sitting there in your car, probably talking on the phone, which maybe you shouldn't do. There are a lot of benefits, and the psychological benefit from driving to the city. We have a daughter who drives to South Philly to teach, and she has to leave very early to get there in time. So I think there's a lot to be said for quality of life.
Thank you very much. One for Peter. Peter, is there a need for citizen support? And if so, what can everybody do?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a great first step, all of you being here with us tonight. But essentially, I think the biggest piece, and what makes this such a unique project, and like Manny had explained it, and you saw in the video, is this TRID legislation. It really empowers us locally as residents, as citizens, to say, okay, we're not going to wait for the state government or the federal government to actually give us funding. We are going to prioritize it here. And so that's really where you need the school district, the county, and the municipality to come together and say, this is a priority for us. And the reality of local government and the reality of government in general is it's all a give and a take. It's a balance. So there are certainly many projects we would love to have here in the community, and it's really a matter of that timing. And so as a community, we have to decide, is this the time for this? I believe tonight, everyone here, the people who are watching, this really speaks volumes that this is a priority for us. We want to alleviate congestion on 422. We want to ensure that we sustain ourselves as a community. We've come a long way in a very short period in time, and we have a long way to go, but we need to make sure that that's done in a sustainable way. One of the things that most excites me, and Marion touched it, John touched on it, is really this adds economic prosperity and opportunity for people in our community, regardless of your background or your education level. So you have an opportunity to go on a train from Phoenixville to a large economic center, have a high-paying job, get on that train and come home. It also gives you an opportunity to go for tourism. It gives people an opportunity to come from Philadelphia out to the suburbs for tourism. So it's very exciting on both fronts. What we need from the public is to know your interest in it. So we need to know that from a borough council perspective. The school board needs to know that from a school district perspective, and then eventually we need the county to know that, and of course both of our state representatives who are visiting us, and Joe who's visiting us from our neighboring district. But we need to let our state know that this is something we're interested in, so we can work together to figure out the solution.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to go to a couple of our Voxy Pop online questions, as well as some from the audience. This one has been touched upon, but where do they plan on putting the station, and is the school station still the most favored spot? Manny?
No, we don't know where we're going to put the station, and there's a bunch of variables to that. Ideally, we'd like to put the station right downtown, with a big parking lot. So there's a lot of things that we have to work through. And each community will be able to choose what they deem is important for their station, and then bring that to the committee. So we don't we have an area that doesn't, so long as the track, I guess, Tom, as long as the track doesn't have a 90-degree bend in it, we can get a station along the frontage. So, and it needs to be accessible. It needs to be accessible by a road system, and it needs to be able to be parked. So we have, there's lots of work to do.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely,
I think this is
Peter.
something that we had talked a lot about in kind of the initial meetings that we had, but I know, Tom, you had added a lot of light to it. Why maybe historical stations like the Columbia Station, not saying the Columbia Station, but why historical stations aren't necessarily the most appropriate stations in modern day?
That's a very good question, and I love the old station. Stations like this, as the short video that we saw earlier identified, date to a time before the automobile. when most people would access the station either on foot or perhaps by horse and wagon. And Manny made a comment earlier, and it's a good number to remember. About 85% of people that access commuter rail networks arrive by automobile. They come in their car by themselves, they park their car, and they get on the train. So typically in a developed urban environment, these beautiful old stations are in locations that just do not have enough space to accommodate that large volume of parking. So that's the major issue.
So we did have a lot of questions about parking. Trevor on Voxy Pop, Jean. Trevor says, what about our current parking struggles in Phoenixville? Seems like all this will do is bring more people to the region, which equals less parking for residents.
Yeah, so that's a great. They're not independent. They're not independent of each other. This is a commuter train, and so it will have its highest use between 7 in the morning and 6 o'clock at night. Phoenixville has an arts and entertainment economic development strategy, so that, and a weekend strategy. So that strategy occurs after 6 o'clock, and certainly hopefully not till 7 a.m., and on the weekends. So Phoenixville has parking needs, and they're trying to be understood, and what's the best place for them and how we can improve them. And I think this train and parking could be symbiotic.
There was one question about how many stations in Phoenixville, which is I think a pretty easy answer.
Yeah, just one.
Okay. We have a question about, I think from our local audience here, what is this going to cost me as a taxpayer, locally, state, federally, and when?
Yeah, so it's not going to cost you as a taxpayer anything. What we're asking the local municipalities to do is to, local taxing authorities, is to transfer the tax from their organization, their bureaucratic organization, to support the train funding. So the taxpayer, the existing taxpayer, will see an increase in property values, but will not see an increase in taxes.
Okay. A follow-up question about home values. So there are many homes that border this train route. Those homes are likely to drop in value. How will you help those homeowners maintain their home values? And also, how will you protect them from noise pollution and keep their kids and pets safe? John's touched on the noise pollution. I think the question of property values.
Yeah, so SEPTA did a study. SEPTA did an economic study, value study, and of the counties Chester, Montgomery, Delaware, and Bucks. Chester County lags behind all of them significantly, so not just by a little bit, based on their lack of public transportation. So to answer the question about home values, there's a published study. We have it on, we can make it available. We'll put it on the internet so that you can read the study yourself. We didn't produce the study. It was produced by SEPTA just to show how SEPTA drives the local economy.
I was actually trying to find, there was also one done by the American Public Transportation Association, but it was actually a fairly significant increase in home value given your direct access to rail transportation.
And actually, I'm going back because I think that this...
Marion has the number.
Oh, jeez.
Marion, numbers?
Well, I have the number for the increased value at the Paoli station. For the single-family homes. They were an additional $16,800 a home, an increased value. And that was from this study that SEPTA had done.
And this slide that I brought back up also shows increase in value of the homes located closest to the trail stations. As you can see, the trail stations are outlined, and it goes from 0% up to, the red is greater than 20%. So I think that history of where the train stations are currently located helps us show that you will see an increase in your property values.
In addition to property values, again, from the American Public Transportation Association, you see for every $1 invested in public transportation, a $4 $4 generated in economic returns, and for every $10 million in capital investment in public transportation, you yield about $30 million in increased business sales. And ironically, kind of an interesting fact, I didn't know this till we were researching it, but traveling by public transportation is actually 10 times safer per mile than traveling by automobile. So being on the train is actually the safest form of travel for you.
That's great. I know there was also a question about impacts on local businesses. Anyone have any insight on what that would do for local businesses?
I think Marion touched briefly on it, but when you look at Phoenixville and where we've come from and where we've come in a very short period in time, and we kind of all laugh about it, but it's essentially, Phoenixville is the capital of craft. We have craft breweries and distilleries. We have unique craft products here in Phoenixville, and we become a unique shopping and arts destination. And so one of the things I'm most excited from a rail perspective is the ability to bring people from Philadelphia, where during all of our festivals and events, you already are seeing people coming into Phoenixville, but the ability for more people to access us from these major urban areas and kind of enjoy our hometown, our small town feel. Second also to that, and Marion touched on it, is the Schuylkill River Trail. It's an exact distance of a marathon from Philadelphia to Phoenixville. So imagine being able to start in Philadelphia, run a marathon essentially, kind of take a little break at one of our breweries and distilleries, get some water, and then get back on that train and go home.
We have coffee here, too.
We have
really good coffee here, too.
You know, we have other things too. We have other things. You
great
can
little
buy a
shops.
shirt at one of our new shops. But essentially, you'd be able to come at, run a marathon, bike down here, put your bike back on the train, ride back home to Philadelphia, and vice versa. We could do the same thing from Phoenixville into Philadelphia. And so, just really neat tourism opportunities.
And I just want to plug the when we have concerts at the Colonial, that might help to bring people from Philadelphia and take that traffic off the road for that and parking.
I think one of the things that we haven't said, and it's one of the most compelling, there's no right reason why not to do this train. 40% Phoenix Village is a project that we built in 2016. There's 400 people that currently live there. 40% of them work in King of Prussia. Tom, what was our estimated commute time from Phoenixville to King of Prussia?
It's not about 14 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah, about 14 minutes. So anybody who's driven down 23, I live 2.5 miles outside of town. It takes me 25 minutes to go 1,000 meters. So these are really significant numbers. They're not made up. You can get to the job centers in King of Prussia in 14 minutes. There's a huge quality of life.
So I think we have time for 2 more questions. This one is an audience question. It says, please explain in a little more detail how the 3/4 mile radius around development is going to work. I think it's the question of how much value will we show within the 3 mile and then within the 3/4 radius. So it's a TRID question. Who wants the TRID question? Manny loves it. Manny?
TRID questions.
Yeah, so I think you have to understand that you have an underlying, and that video that our public relations committee did was fantastic. Every piece of property pays real estate taxes. If it's undeveloped or it's underdeveloped, it pays a small amount of taxes. If it's developed to its highest and best purpose, it is assessed a much larger value. So the difference between what it is as underdeveloped or undeveloped versus what it is completed, that value is what is the money that we're going to use for our mortgage or our bond, which has a principal and interest component. So it may help you understand it a little differently. If we need $100 million, we have to go borrow $100 million by floating a bond. And we have an interest and principal payment on that $100 million. And so the legislation allows us to take advantage of this tax increment financing. It's the money between what it was and what it is finished, and allows us to apply it to our maintenance payments. That's the essence of it. After this is over, if you have any other questions, I'll try to better explain it.
I think it's important too, the TRID is the TRID legislation is what established our 3/4
That's correct.
range. So it's in the law.
And we use those numbers a lot, and it does even as a committee. Sometimes those numbers. So the 3-mile radius is when SEPTA did its study, where they studied the property value increases. The 3/4 mile radius is where you have to have the development. You essentially have to declare the TRID district within a 3/4 mile radius of the station or proposed station. So essentially, I mean, when I say that, like, we have to make a community decision, like, this is a hyper local community decision. Like, this is us. This isn't Montclair. I mean, you know, there's a portion of Montclair that is in the 3/4 mile radius of this space, but this is literally us making this decision for us. And an interesting piece of the legislation is that these items that we would purchase with this bond have to only solely be used by us. It's not like, you know, we buy these things, we give them to SEPTA, SEPTA uses them anywhere they want. We literally buy these things and they become used only for the people who contributed funding to the program.
This is a
But
Phoenixville born
I'd
and
like
raised.
to add that
Go ahead.
SEPTA will manage the station. We don't manage it locally.
Yeah.
Right. Is that?
To address the second half of that question, if the development doesn't occur within the 3/4 mile radius, how are the bonds paid?
What,
They're not.
yeah.
They're not. So you have to time your development. That's why this is so essential. You have to know where your development can be, and then you have to make sure that there's a station within 3/4 of a mile that works for the project itself. So it's a very complicated. There's lots of steps, and if you get any of them wrong, you don't have.
And
Go ahead.
Peter? No? Huh? Sure. John?
This TRID program you're talking about seems like the more developable properties there are, the better chance there are. So it's a short distance between here and Norristown along the Norfolk line, and the majority of that real estate between here and Norristown is taken up by the Freedoms Foundation, Valley Forge Park. Once you get on the other side of Valley Forge Park, you get King of Prussia, where I think, you know, would be a good spot for a station. You know, you're basically not in King of Prussia, but you're inside of Bridgeport. Have you open communication with Bridgeport to see if they've got the stomach for this type of a project, you know, right in their backyard? That's very close to Norristown as well, but it seems that's one of the few spots between Phoenixville, unless you can somehow get Valley Forge Park or one of these.
No, that's a great question. The opportunity is, and Barry has driven up and down and walked up and down the line to see we have enough, and we have plenty of opportunities, albeit they're in small clusters, for development to line this up. So we are going to talk to anybody down the line and try to get them on board, and try to and have them appoint somebody to the TRID committee so that they can develop these ideas further.
Okay.
Well, follow-up question then. So then there is a desire to have more than one station between here and Norristown.
Yes. Yes, as a matter of fact, and this is down the road but there's even the opportunity to have a tourist train from Philadelphia to Valley Forge National Park using the traditional station. So there's once you get the train established, you're going to see this thing grow and mature, and the whole project will mature.
I think this line of question goes into what Peter was saying about the timing of these things, identifying the station locations, setting up the TRIDs. Your comment about what's left in the area, I think that's an important comment, which leads into Peter's suggestion about the timing and it being within our community to make those decisions. Tom?
Yeah, if I could just add, looking at the map, you can see there have been assumptions. We don't have, as has been mentioned multiple times, there are not specific sites identified, but broadly 3 general locations, generally Phoenixville, generally somewhere in Schuylkill Township, and generally somewhere in King of Prussia. But there are no final plans yet, but generally three locations.
I appreciate that as the attorney, you clarifying that those are not the station locations. So we have, I think we're done on our time limit for tonight, so I'm just going to kind of float it to each one of our panel members. We've had a lot of discussions. Are there any last thoughts that you have, any comments you want to make before we part ways with our audience and our virtual audience as well?
I mean, it's amazing to me. I mean, this whole process has been amazing to me. When you look historically at what Phoenixville has done through our innovation and just looking and doing things differently, like Manny said, our history is basically full of people who have told us that it's not possible. And every time we're told it's not possible, we go out and we figure out a different way to do it. And this is a different way of doing it, and it's not been done before. And this is unique. It's unique to us, and we're a unique community. And if anybody was going to do it through this process and prioritize it and say we can make it possible, it would be Phoenixville. And so my money's on Phoenixville.
Says the mayor of Phoenixville.
And if anyone has $111 million, we can have one in 3 years.
In 3 years,
What Tom says, 3 years.
No, I think this is a great opportunity. I think if in fact we, and I say we, the community does, if in fact we do this, then this will be the greatest thing that we could do. Okay, so, and every great endeavor always has great challenges, and this one has provided as many as it possibly could. So I think it's really important that we try and see what happens.
I think that if this works, and we are the test pilot, but if it works, this is something that we can utilize throughout the county. And, we're sitting here on the north end, but try being in the south end of the county. They really virtually have nothing as far as transportation goes. So this could open up a wide breadth of options for this county. And the other thing that I think is really important is it helps keep our community diverse, because what we don't want to have happen is they get pushed out, prices go up and they get pushed out. This way they can work anywhere. They can take the train, they can work, and they can live here. And that's really what Phoenixville's always been about and what it should be about.
I don't think I can do better than the mayor.
Mic drop. Tom, anything? No? Okay, I just want to mention that, we would try to take questions that we could here tonight, and I want you to say we can follow up on Facebook, follow up on the website, follow up on our email address, which is info@steelcityrail.com. So all of the questions that you have, you can contact us moving forward. We will try to have an ongoing dialogue online so that we can continue to answer the questions that are raised. Peter, final remarks?
Final thoughts. So Marion touched on something that's so important, and I just really want to impart these couple final points on you. Number one, we have come a long way with this project. This group's been working together for close to 15 months. We've come a long way, but we recognize we still have a very long way to go. So that's why a lot of where is the station going to be? We don't have those answers yet, but we are, as Manny said, we're chipping away piece by piece. We're kind of, we're getting some no's, and then we're backing up a bit, getting some yeses, getting some no's. And this is going to be an ongoing process. The journey is just beginning for us, but we hope to kind of put this journey into hyper speed, because there are a lot of timing, as many of you have acknowledged, there are a lot of timing issues dealing with development. This gives us the ability to set our own course as a community. It also keeps us innovative. It makes Phoenixville a very special and unique place that we can help other communities model that process. But one of the most important things to me, and Marion touched on it, is we don't want to push people out of Phoenixville. And so just as we are doing this project that we will see home values increase, we will continue to push in our innovative way. And we have one of the first affordable housing projects, our Steeltown Village, which is set to open next month. We're going to be doing the big ribbon cutting for it next month. It's one of the first projects in the county to truly offer affordable housing, meaning that people can live at 30% of their income. So we're going to continue to support and ensure that our seniors and individuals who want to live in Phoenixville and want to contribute to the dynamic community that we are always able to do so. And so those are the things I hope that you would take away from tonight, is that this is about us prioritizing what's important to us as a community, but also ensuring that people can stay here and that all of our resources are shared. So I just want to personally thank all of you here in the room. Thank you to all of you out there who have joined us virtually. There are a couple groups that we do want to thank because of the contributions that they've made to tonight's program. Specifically, we'd like to thank the Demutis Group, Voxy Pop, the Phoenix Media Group, and Robert Ryan Catering. But most especially, thank you to all of you. Thank you for taking your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of the wonderful questions that you've submitted. We do have one final announcement, and I think Brooke has a slide to. Oh,
I have a
do we?
slide.
I think we have one more, don't we?
Do we?
We have one more slide.
I?
There's one more slide up there. So how do you learn more?
There isn't.
The most important thing that one of the important things we talked about tonight is that we need your involvement as a community to keep this going. Not only to kind of let us know, is this the priority? We believe that we've got the pulse right, that it is a priority. Let us know that. Keep kind of pushing us so that we can move faster. The other piece is that now we're growing. So we're not growing or changing our goal. So our goal as a task force, and moving forward, the goal will always be to restore rail service between Philadelphia and Phoenixville. So that's one end to the other. But we are going to be taking on a more regional presence or regional role, as you've probably learned from the TRID process today, as we start to engage other municipalities, other school districts, and other counties. And so we've essentially realized the need to kind of change the name of our task force. So our task force is essentially growing and becoming Steel City Rail. And so that's going to be what our project is known as moving forward, and that's going to be the group that continues to move forward with it. We would suggest that you check us out on Facebook, like us there. You send us an email there with any questions we may not have been able to get to tonight, but you can always check it out there for other meetings that will be coming up, as well as updates that we may have as we move forward. Leaving you parting thoughts. Phoenixville, and when you sit and you think historically about what this town has done, where we started, the rails that are outside here and the historic rails that were laid on the Philadelphia to Reading line were constructed here in Phoenixville. The railroad was made with our iron. It was made with our innovation, our blood, our sweat, and our tears. Monuments, bridges all over the world, they were constructed with Phoenixville steel and Phoenixville iron. And we are a strong community of people who work hard. And that's the most important thing that we can be today, and we will always be, is that we will be an innovative community. We will continue to grow and be sustainable and ensure that all of the resources that we have are multiplied, but at the same time, as they are multiplied, they will be shared by everybody. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this, but most importantly, thank you for being part of the Phoenixville community.